You ever get that feeling that you're moving through a world that's been shaped by forces you can't quite see? That major trends and public opinions just kind of pop into existence? Well, you're not wrong. Beneath the surface of our society, there are these unseen architects, these invisible systems of control. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and map out the hidden machinery of modern power.
Okay, so our journey starts with this really powerful idea from Edward Bernays, who was a pioneer in public relations. He basically argued that huge, complex societies, well, they can't just run on pure chaos. They need to be managed. But this management, this invisible government, it doesn't rule by force alone. No, it rules by shaping the public mind. So, first up, the invisible government. We're going to dive into how this one guy, Edward Bernays, argued that to keep society from falling into chaos, it has to be guided. And his favorite tool for the job? Propaganda. Now, when we hear the word propaganda, we probably think of old, dusty wartime posters, right? But for Bernays, it was something way bigger. It was a consistent, ongoing effort to organize the absolute chaos of modern life. He really saw it as this essential tool for managing everything: politics, finance, education, even charity. It was the master tool for bringing order to a world just buzzing with competing ideas. So, how did this new method actually work? Well, Bernays saw two ways to do things. The old way was just a direct assault, basically yelling, "Buy this piano," and just hoping to wear someone down. But the new propaganda, it was subtle. It was all about creating an environment, a circumstance, where people, driven by their own unconscious desires, suddenly feel like they need a piano. See the shift? It's moving from targeting your logic to targeting your deepest desires. And this case study, this is just a brilliant example of how it works in the real world. So say you want to sell velvet. You don't run ads saying, "Velvet is great." No. Instead, you figure out who the key influencers are, in this case, French fashion designers. You convince them that velvet is the next big thing. And once they start using it, the fashion magazines report on it as a hot new trend. And then, of course, the department stores have to stock it to stay on top of things. Before you know it, the public sees velvet positioned as the absolute height of fashion, and a desire is created. What started as a tiny trickle becomes a flood, and you never had to make a single direct argument. Bernays' methods were definitely an art form, but right around the mid-20th century, that art started to become a science. And to really understand how that happened, we need to look at a field that studies control itself: cybernetics. Cybernetics. It's a term coined by a guy named Norbert Wiener. It sounds really complex, but the core idea is actually pretty simple. It's the science of steersmanship. Just think of a thermostat in your house. It steers the temperature of a room toward a goal you set by using information or feedback about the current temperature. And this exact same principle of control through feedback, it applies to animals, machines, and even entire societies. Let's just stick with that thermostat for a second. Its goal is, say, 72 degrees. The feedback loop is the thermometer that's constantly checking the current temperature. Now, if the room is only 68 degrees, that 4-degree difference, that's the error signal. And the corrective action? That's the furnace kicking on to close that gap. This simple loop, goal, feedback, error, correction, is the engine that drives every single control system out there. But, there's always a catch, and it's explained by something called W. Ross Ashby's Law of Requisite Variety. What it means is, to effectively control a really complex system, your control mechanism has to be just as complex. I mean, you can't steer a battleship with a canoe paddle, right? And that's exactly why simple solutions almost always fail when you try to apply them to incredibly complex problems, like an economy. They just don't have enough variety to handle it. Okay, with that framework in mind, let's look at society's first great machine, the economy. I want you to think of it as this massive, sprawling beast, an economic Leviathan that powerful forces are constantly trying to steer. Right, so this whole idea of the Leviathan, it comes from the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. He saw the state as an artificial man that was designed to impose order on the chaos of human nature. In this view, this is almost a proto-cybernetic idea, right? It perfectly frames the economy as this vast machine built to organize the chaotic interactions of millions and millions of people. This is what scientists call first-order cybernetics. It's where you are an observer standing outside the system, trying to steer it. In a traditional economy, it's the feedback loops, like price signals, that do the steering. If prices go up, that's a signal to produce more. But today, we have something else. We have a new digital Leviathan. A platform like Amazon isn't just reacting to price signals anymore. It uses a massive flood of real-time data and powerful algorithms to directly control its entire economic universe, from the warehouses to the sellers, all the way to you.
Now, let's contrast that beast with our second great system, government. Because if the economy is a machine that you steer from the outside, government is something else entirely. It's a system that creates and sustains itself, completely from within. And the perfect metaphor for this is the Orouborus, that ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail. It represents a closed loop, right? A system that's totally self-referential and is constantly regenerating, drawing its very existence from itself. This brings us to what's called second-order cybernetics. This is where you can't stand outside the system because you are already part of it. I mean, think about it. You can't observe the government without being a citizen or a taxpayer or a subject. And the system's main goal isn't profit. It's its own survival. It uses power to generate more power. It operates with something called operational closure, which just means it only sees the world through its own unique lens of laws, regulations, and authority. It literally defines its own reality.
And this is exactly where the two beasts collide. They speak completely different languages. Let's take a financial crisis. The economic Leviathan sees it in its language: costs, risks, profits, bailouts. It's all a question of payment versus non-payment. But the governmental Ouroboros sees the exact same event and translates it into its language: threats to stability, new regulations, emergency authority. For it, it's a question of power versus non-power. They live in the same world, but they interpret it through these totally incompatible codes. So, for centuries, these two giant beasts have sort of danced around each other. But now, in our digital age, something new is happening. They're starting to fuse together into this weird hybrid creature, a totally new form of control. For centuries, these two systems have been locked in this kind of dance, each one reacting to the other's moves. But that dance is becoming a fusion. You've got governments starting to think like tech platforms, using data and algorithms to manage their citizens. And at the same time, giant tech platforms are starting to act like governments, creating their own rules and their own systems of power. The Leviathan is learning the Ouroboros' tricks, and the Ouroboros is learning the Leviathan's. And the founder of cybernetics, Norbert Wiener, he saw this coming. As early as 1947, he was already deeply pessimistic. He recognized that these incredibly powerful new tools for communication and control were going to lead to a really dangerous concentration of power. He said he had only a very slight hope that the benefits would end up outweighing that risk.
And this right here is his most profound warning. The ultimate threat isn't that machines are going to become sentient and take over. No. The real danger is that humans, whether they're political leaders or corporate leaders, will use these machine-like systems and their cold mechanical logic to amplify their control over other human beings, basically treating all of us as nothing more than cogs in a giant machine.
And so, that leaves us with this final, really unsettling question. As the cold logic of these vast economic and political machines fuses into one, where does that leave us? In this new world that they are building, what, truly, is the human use of human beings?